Hello and welcome to another edition of the Door 14 Hockey Podcast. I'm your host Marty alongside Dave.
Hello.
Hello, just the two of us again.
Yeah. Comes
It's
around every now
become
and again.
it does, doesn't it? I think was it last week it was me and last episode it was me and John. The week before I think the one before that was me and you. It's starting to turn into a thing. John and Aaron are absent tonight. Unfortunately, they both have dad duties. For different reasons. But yes, so I'm sure, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get them on to the next podcast, which technically would be the last podcast of the regular season before we hit the playoff
True.
season here in the
True.
UK. So maybe we'll get them on, and that'll be at least we'll have had them for the first podcast of the season and the last podcast of the season, and we'll have everybody together, especially before we head towards playoff weekend and whenever we all actually meet and are away for that weekend as well. Dave, how are you doing?
Good. I'm enjoying the tail end of our league, as we were saying. It's been some cracking games over the last few weeks.
It has indeed, and we were at the Belfast Giants, Cardiff Devils double header this past weekend there.
Spicy.
And obviously we're heading toward another big weekend this coming weekend. And I think let's just talk about it. Let's just get in there as we always do at the start of our episodes, and just let's talk about the league and the league standings, because it's we've got 4 games left of the regular season. Everyone has 4 games left of the regular season. After this past week, the Guildford Flames had 1 game in hand, and they played as of recording, we're on Thursday the 23rd, and they played that game against the Coventry Blaze on March 22nd. It was Wednesday the 22nd, and came away with the win there to take them within 2 points of the top of the league, just behind the Belfast Giants. All teams are all teams apart from one, I think. Nope, 2. Most teams have played 50 games. Majority. The top 4 teams that are still in contention have played 50 games, I should say. So let's just run through that quickly just to see what it looks like. So sitting top of the league with 50 games played, 78 points is the Belfast Giants. In second is Guildford Flames with 50 games played, 76 points. The Sheffield Steelers sit in third with 50 games played, 73 points. The Cardiff Devils, who are still mathematically in contention, which we'll come back to, are in fourth place with 50 games played, 71 points. The Coventry Blaze are in fifth with 51 games played, 66 points. Manchester have moved up into sixth with 50 games played and 46 points. The Nottingham Panthers sit in seventh, having an abysmal run, and we'll talk about that too. 50 games played, 42 points, and Glasgow Clan currently are sitting with the last playoff spot in 8th place with 52 games played, 35 points. Five Flyers sit in ninth with 51, 32, and Dundee are at the bottom with 50 games played and 29 points. Dundee have a tough one this weekend, because they are coming up against sitting second place Guildford Flames, who are going up to Dundee to play in a double header, I believe, this coming weekend. Or is Dundee down in Guildford playing a double header? Either way, it's a double header for Guildford and Dundee. Dave, I've tried to work it out. I've tried to do my best Rain Man impersonation today, and I've wrote down my notes because I've tried to work out the maths behind it all, because I'm kind of like, how does it work? So we have technically 2 weekends left. And if I've got it correctly, Guildford needs to drop 1 out of 3 in regulation, and Belfast win 2. So there's 52 games, 82 points, maximum of 86 points. Guildford, 52 games, 78 points, maximum of 82 points. Basically, I think if I've worked out correctly, the Belfast Giants need to beat Guildford and one other team in the last 4 in order to take the league. So, with that in mind, if it's one other team and Guildford that we need to beat, what's your thoughts? I mean, Guildford, I'm not saying Guildford have an easy one this weekend, because we know you can't win any.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that 2 weekends in the trot. You can never count a team out. It was the Blaze beat us in the second game, and then Cardiff beat us in the second game. Not 2 very strong teams, but it shows you what a double header can do. But one thing I do love about this season, compared to a few others that the Giants have had, is that it's completely in the Giants' destiny. It's up to them. They win the games, they win the league. So they don't have to rely on magical results and other people beating other people. If the Giants take it each game as it comes and just put the hard work in, win the games, then they'll win the league. Not saying it's not it's not a foregone conclusion, but it's better to have it that way than having to rely on another team.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting. We know we're going into another tough weekend. We've got Sheffield on Friday and then Manchester on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And Manchester this season have been just one of them teams that they've a fantastic netminder, and Jeremy Bruder,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and have the ability to score. So on a good night, we know they can do it. They did it, I think, earlier in the season. So we've got those two games. Can't look past them. Need to get the work done in them ones, and then if it comes down to the Guildford game, it'll be in my opinion, the best way to win it. You're going up against the two of the best teams in the league, and decided out on the night.
And I think you're right. I kind of I was trying to figure out if it's obviously 2 wins. If the Giants win this weekend, both games this weekend, as well as Guildford both win this weekend, no matter what, it's going to come down to that game against Guildford. In Belfast next week. So obviously the week of our non-recording week. But as I say, by the time we come back to our next recording, the league will have already been decided. We'll know who the league champions are at that point, and actually we'll be heading towards that playoff game. But it's interesting because, as you say, I mean, it'd be good to kind of have that. That's going to be an intense game, that final game of that final game, and it's not the final game of the season, but it's the final game in Belfast, shall we say, and that's the final game between Guildford and Belfast. So it's going to be an interesting one if it is going to come down to that game. I think it's going to come down to that game, and I think by the end of that game next Saturday, we will have I think we'll be crowning the champions on that day. I don't think we'll be waiting to that last game of the season on the Sunday. I know John, who's listening, I'm sure. I know John was, fingers crossed, was hoping for it to happen in Dundee, because he was like, I'm getting tickets, I'm going to go to Dundee. But I'm hoping, touch wood, my desk is wooden, I suppose. I'm just hoping that the Giants are able to kind of pull it out of the bag and do the business that they need to do and take it against Guildford on that Saturday. Because that last game of the season, if it was come down to that Sunday, that'll be an intense game. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting final 2 weeks, and we are moving towards that pretty quickly. Given the fact we are now on Thursday, and as of listening to this podcast, if you've downloaded it if you've downloaded from your podcast provider of choice this morning, it's Friday, and it's a game night for Belfast. So we will see. It'll be against Sheffield Steelers, so it'll be an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Just having a quick look, we joked around there about the Cardiff Devils. There was I think it was their GM this past week, or the coach this past weekend, after their win against the Belfast Giants on Sunday past, said that they were mathematically still in the running and in contention for the league.
Theoretically.
I don't know, but the woes don't. I suppose the biggest woes that are currently happening across the league, and it's worth mentioning, and it'd be silly not to, is down there in the East Midlands, where we will be heading for the playoffs in Nottingham. Nottingham Panthers, Dave. I mean, what has happened their season this year? I mean, it has imploded, and this past week has just been. Really has. I think they had a game as well. Was it last night or the night before? It was midweek game anyway. Poorly attended. And we've seen the photographs of the attendance figures. It was low, and they were booed off. I think it was another 5-0 or something. It was someone
5-1
against Dundee. Was that one?
Yeah,
Dundee
Dundee. And it's just in my opinion, that's just sort of the icing on the cake. It's been so bad for Corey in the last, I don't know, half a season he's been here, so he hasn't been able to get what he needs out of the players, and he is just struggling to get something to click. When you see his interviews, he just looks beaten.
Yep.
and he at the minute, I think he just wants to be able to see 60 minutes from his team, a 60-minute performance from all his guys. I don't think he would really care about the results, but I just don't think he's getting it. You get runs of like they're getting the shots on net, they're just not converting, and then they're poor in defense when there's a breakaway. They'll make a mistake, and then it'll be buried, and that's exactly what happens in Nottingham on Wednesday. They just didn't have what it takes to weather the storm.
No, and it's just, I mean, it's just going to go worse from worse. I mean, if you look at if you consider just how they're playing at this time and the difficulty that they're having them in Nottingham, you know, I think there's a bit of there was a thing put out this week about you know, whether or not the team has switched off completely from Corey and whether or not like the team has just completely just like, you know, just kind of given up kind of thing. They're still in playoff contention. They still have a chance to win a trophy at the end of the season in the playoffs. Now, granted, if the league finishes in the same way that it's currently standing as it is today, the Nottingham Panthers will come up against the Guildford Flames in that playoff semi-final game, quarter-final game, that playoff knockout games, like obviously that'll happen not next week, the following week. I mean, Nottingham coming up against Guildford. I mean, do we see Nottingham Panthers this year at the big weekend?
I don't. It's going to be whoever they come up against in that top four. It's going to be such an uphill challenge. You never want to count Nottingham out. We've seen that. What was it? They put us. Was it the Challenge Cup or was it the playoffs? They put us out with a 7. We went in with a 7-1 lead or something, and then they came back and beat us. So you know, you never want to count them out, but they're not in a good way.
No.
And unless they start stringing the last 4 games, if they get a bit of form in these last 4 games, if they continue the form they're on, they could be going in with another 4 losses, and they're not going to win a knockout game after that.
Nope. Nope.
You couldn't get yourself G'd up to win that.
The Nottingham Panthers have announced today, though, for all their fans, that it's going to be their game on the 1st of April, which is the last home game, I believe, of the season for them, is Fan Appreciation Night. So,
April Fool's Day, nice.
Did you think that? Yeah. Oh,
gonna come out wearing Steelers jerseys?
Possibly. You never know. Okay. I think that's us for the Elite League for now. We will obviously come back to it before the end of the episode, obviously in period 1. So what we'll do is we'll switch our attention across the water to the NHL as well. Especially interesting in that I think I read today that there is 4 weeks roughly left of the NHL regular season as well. So we have, I think, sorry. Yeah,
proper business sense.
I think was it 50 something days left officially, so it's just over a month and a half left, but it's just over four and a bit weeks. So as things currently stand, there is one team who has already made the playoffs, which no surprise, we will talk about in a minute, but I'm sure you can guess because we talked about them in the previous episodes. But looking at the eastern side of the country and the Metropolitan Division, Carolina sit top with 69 games played at 100 points. The New Jersey Devils sit in second with 71 games played at 98 points, and the New York Rangers are sitting in third with 71 games played at 92 points. Boston, switching over to the Atlantic Division then, Boston have clinched their playoff spot already. We talked about it, me and John talked about it last week. Boston have had a phenomenal run this season. I think it was the quickest team to over 100 points in a single season. I think was a record that they broke this year with 70 games played on 113 points. Toronto are in second with 70 games played at 93 points, and Tampa Bay are in third with 72 games played at 90 points. Wildcard spots currently held by the New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Florida are hot on the heels though of Pittsburgh and New York Islanders, so there's still a bit of play to go there for that last wildcard spot, just on that side of the country. Switching our attention into the Western side in the Central Division, Dallas are sitting top with 71 games played and 90 points. Minnesota are also on 71 games played and 90 points in second. And third are Colorado with 70 games played and 88 points. In the Pacific Division then, Vegas sit top still with 71 games played and 94 points. Los Angeles Kings are in second with 71 games played and 92 points. And Edmonton are in third, knocking Seattle out for the first time this season, having played 72 games and 90 points. Seattle have took a bit of a slump and have moved down into the wild card spot with 70 games played, 85 points, followed by Winnipeg in second with 72 games played, 83 points. Dave, we've talked about before, and we always talk about, obviously that this side of the country in terms of, the how tight things are, especially like that central division and everything else. We're heading to a point though where we're kind of looking, and there's starting to become a bit of a gap between those wild card spots and the central teams, the top three central teams. I mean, and it's not a foregone conclusion because obviously there's only one team that is clinched to play a spot. But I mean, if we look at the wild card spots, Seattle and Winnipeg holding that 85 and 83 points, and then the next team down is 79 points, Calgary. Of course, significant things can change in the space of the next 4 weeks. But what's your take?
It's going to be tough for any of those teams that are currently not in that contention. It does feel to me that it's going to be one of those three, Seattle, Winnipeg, or Calgary, are going to be one of the ones to take that those wildcard spots, mainly just to do with the current running forms. I think Nashville's sort of taken their foot off the gas a bit and had a few wobbles. They're starting to get outscored. Their goal average is starting to drift, and they're starting to move into the minuses, which is never a good sign. I always like to see the Preds in the playoffs. Maybe they'll change it around. They do have a few extra games in hand, which might make the difference on them. I'm super glad, obviously, to see the Wild up where they are, and are probably in better form than anybody else in the Central Division, even considering their injury woes. They've had a few key players out injured. Kippersoft, for example, obviously our top goal scorer, is currently sidelined with a lower body injury and probably won't be back until playoffs. But we're finding goal scoring ability throughout our lines at the minute, which is great. And hopefully that can continue into the playoffs. It's nice to go in with obviously the top seed, but as long as you're not in the wild card spot.
Yeah, no, I get you. And if we look at the league in general, especially coming towards the end of the season, obviously we've got four teams at the moment battling for the wooden spoon, and I guess that draft positioning, Anaheim, Chicago, San Jose, and Columbus. Quite a big gap there between Anaheim and Montreal as the next team up. Anaheim on a minus 104 differential. I mean, it's just, it is a case of who's gonna get the wooden spoon and who's gonna get that peak draft spot. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes to, even though it's like at the end of the season for them pretty much. But all time will tell. And when we come to our next recording in 2 weeks' time, we will literally be towards the end of that.
2 weeks ago,
and that's
see a lot more X's on the table at that stage.
I'd say so. I'd say I would hazard a guess that by the time we come back to our next podcast recording, I would hazard a guess we'll see an X beside Carolina. For definite.
Oh yeah, they're 100 points.
100 points. I'd say we'll have them on there, and I'd say probably New Jersey. I would say we'll see an X maybe beside them too.
Yeah. Jeez, didn't even see that. Carolina's doing really well. A load of games in hand as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I was drinking there. So, with that, we'll finish off our roundup of the standings and the league tables. And what we'll do then is we'll get stuck straight in to our period 1 of hockey. Okay, period one is a roundup of news stories from around the UK. We have a couple of stories going around that we want to have a bit of a chat about, Dave. And I know the first one to kind of maybe have a brief chat about just first off, just because it's an interesting one, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it, and I wanted to see if you had done it. Was this past about last week the the Viaplay Elite Ice Hockey the Elite League, sorry, Viaplay Elite League put out a statement or put out a link for the first ever Elite League fan survey, which was launched on last Monday past. I don't know the exact date. The survey is open until this coming weekend, the 26th of March. So if you haven't filled in the survey, it's worth filling it in if you want to answer some really random questions. More importantly, it's because there's stuff being given away. So if you do it, I think each of the teams are giving away, I think you're entered into a competition, but also the Elite League event, you're entered into a competition, so you have a chance to win 2 different prizes. That's the main reason you want to do it. But the questions are a bit interesting. So I suppose the first thing we should mention is, though, that over 4,000 people had responded to the survey on the first day that the survey was launched, which the Elite League has put a statement out the next day and said, when the survey was published, the survey hit over 1,000 submissions within the first hour, and the response rate since has just climbed and climbed, leaving a total of 4,000 at the end of the first day. This has blown our and PwC's estimates out of the water for just a single afternoon. So they probably weren't expecting to get as many responses as they did at that point. So the first question that I'm going to ask Dave is, did you do the survey? No. Okay. No. It's fine. Let me explain the survey to you and some bits of the survey. I did the survey on that afternoon. So I'm one of those 1,000 people who submitted. No, one of the 4,000 people who submitted on the first day. And I found it an interesting experience in that it was...
live updating news, just so you know. Now over 6,500 people have completed the survey.
There you go. Was that just... Did they put it out today, did they?
They put it out today, yeah.
There you go. So that's significantly. I suppose that's a good enough number. That's probably a fan base. That's probably equal to one. Well, I suppose it's a good number. I suppose it's a high number for any kind of survey, I guess. But I suppose it was interesting in that the questions that were being asked, kind of like you had your standard survey questions. Kind of like, what team do you support and blah, 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 and how long have you followed and all that kind of stuff. And then it had questions around like your spending habits, your buying habits, your amount of money you bring in each month. If you, would you buy products that the team, are sponsored by and promote and blah, 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 blah. And it was okay. It was interesting. Like, what kind of car do you drive? It was really random things that they're asking. Obviously, the usual consumer questions they're asking. Obviously, the idea is probably so they can try to tailor the ad revenue so that it's the right kind of ads that they're maybe catering towards their fans. What I did find a bit strange is, so for a fan survey, I think what a lot of fans were hoping for was maybe just kind of downplayed a lot in this survey. I think fans, whenever the survey was kind of put out, I think fans were looking maybe the opportunity to kind of give feedback as much as possible on different aspects. And while there was an aspect of, feedback around what your thoughts were on the product and everything, it was very little. There was like one question around how can we improve the Elite League. I let loose. I just, I was like keyboard warrior, just like boom, 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 typing in there. Everything from, transparency with, we talked about it before, transparency with fines, transparency in general with communications. Talked about how ownership of teams and also being the owners of the league kind of doesn't really work very well in terms of like there doesn't seem to be quite. A lot of different things. And I also talked about things like the refereeing and how bad refereeing is and it should be looked at and how inconsistent the DOPS is and blah, blah, blah. All the usual stuff. I put it into the box, even if that wasn't really where I was supposed to put it. I still put it in anyway. And then they did ask a question around, like your own home team and what could improve nighttime or like, your experience at night, your experience at the games and stuff. So from that point of view, it was okay. But I just felt, I don't know if anybody else, like, let us know what you thought. I mean, it just felt a bit, didn't feel much. I know one of the things I did suggest, which would be nice to see, and I know maybe the reason why it stopped was because of COVID and they just didn't bring it back, was playoff weekend. They used to have a fan forum, a playoff weekend.
Yes.
where they used to invite along fans, and you could go along and you could kind of ask questions to the GMs and stuff, and kind of get a bit more of an insight in what was going on. And I know it was limited numbers wise to each, like, so each fan base only had a certain, each team had only had a certain number of fans could attend it or whatever. But I would like to see that back again.
Yeah. No,
And
I
I think
agree.
I put that down as one of the suggestions as well, about trying to improve things. I did put in some suggestions around what I thought things could be improved. So I didn't just complain about it. I put in some suggestions around how you could improve certain things. So hopefully my keyboard warriorism.
Yeah, it's one of those things. The league, they need the input from the fans, but they want it. The reason they've done it like this is, and that's because PwC is helping them. It's to sort of tailor the responses in a way that they can use them. And that's why they won't have wanted a lot of free text, because it's hard to, especially if you get 6,000
True.
with pure text. Whenever now there should be somebody that reads all of these. That's just the way it is. There should be, and PwC will be obviously pushing them to do that. But they will, anybody who falls in the middle of the road in the survey will probably be ignored, and they'll look at the extremes, and look at the people who love it, and look at the people who hate it, and then they'll use that information to make changes. It is good they're doing it, but I do think an actual public forum, because our biggest issue with the league now is that, as you said, that transparency. It got really transparent before COVID, with the changes of the DOPS, and whenever Kelman was taking a more front seat spokesperson role, and then post COVID, a lot of that's rolled away. The league is back to just this, the old country club mentality. It's the members of the league are the ones that run it. Same as in a country club or the golf club. The members of the club run it. And yes, that's fine. But what we should be looking for is looking towards a chairman for the league, someone to run the league, and trying to improve it. Now, there's always that argument with who's going to pay for it. But playoff weekend brings in a chunk of change. If you look at it from a overall standpoint, there's bound to be ways to do it. May it be looking at, I know we're going to talk about it in period 2 with the jersey deals, finding a single vendor. But,
yeah. And I think you're right. I think the thing of like who will pay for it and where will that come from. I mean, my maybe I'm completely wrong, but my understanding I always thought would be that each team would have to pay a certain amount of fee, kind of not like the same way that NHL does, but like, there would have to be some kind of like fee each year for the team to still be able to play within that league. So if the money goes towards a fee, towards like, we want to play in this league, so therefore here's our money for our fee for this year. You would imagine, you would like to think that some of that fee money or whatever it would be would be able to go towards. I know they probably should then to pay like referees and blah 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 blah. But you kind of think, well then maybe you should be thinking about an aspect of, as you say, there needs to be a bit more. As you said, it does feel like it's like a boys' club, kind of like, there's a certain key members of certain key GMs maybe have a bit more power than others, and I think we've seen that in previous, in terms of like, after certain GM meetings where you maybe hear some of the maybe the non-arena teams, shall we say, kind of not being a bit more vocal about some of the decisions that are made. But you've had things like in the past where you've had like teams saying like, well, this decision's being made and we don't really agree with this decision, but like, who are we to, we don't have the power to change that, because
and that's one thing that they lost whenever Edinburgh fell away. Whenever Edinburgh was still there, the Scottish teams had the ability to sort of combine their votes.
Yeah.
And I know it's only 4, but that's, you're not kicking the arse off half the league there whenever Edinburgh was still there. And then now obviously it's not quite the same, but it's it is a tough spot whenever everybody just has one vote, and especially when the obviously all taking the Giants in this too, the bigger teams will want things that are more expensive. If that makes sense,
Yeah.
looking at import levels, and they're looking at the number of games, and the higher number of games obviously makes more money for them, but it means more travel for
Mm-hmm.
some of the smaller clubs, So, but yeah, it's always going to be tough. But to me in this day and age, why are those company meetings? At the end of the day, it's a company. Why aren't the company minutes public?
Yeah, I would agree. Oh,
Um, you know,
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
the and unless there's something to hide.
And I agree. I think that, and again, it comes back to the whole transparency thing again. It'll be interesting to see. It'd just be, that I think. I think if I'm right in saying, I think whenever we were joking around about it on our group chat about like did anybody do it or whatever, I think John responded and said, "Oh, I did it too." And then I said about transparency, and he was like, "That was the exact word he used. That was the buzzword he used." I was wondering if I don't know what they're called, but those like I'm sure PwC has some way of like collating all of the written information that's there, and then each
Yeah,
like
they'll have
any words, the words that are used the most regularly, you
the
know,
mind map jobbies.
yes, they become bigger and bigger and bigger. Those kind of things. So I don't know if maybe that'll happen. Like maybe transparency will be the big one that'll appear out of
There,
nowhere.
yeah, there's definitely been a backward step when it comes to that stuff. And it's not even a huge backward step, especially when it comes to things like fines. They're starting to bring in the fines. They hadn't been using them for a very long time, but all it takes is an extra couple of lines.
Yeah.
How much and where's it going?
Yeah.
It's
So if you haven't done so yet, Dave, you're included in this because I know you haven't done it. But if you haven't done so yet, and you feel in any way like you would like to take part in the survey,
does it ask you? Does it not ask you what your favorite hockey related social media is? No.
no,
Oh.
no, no, it doesn't. No, nothing like that. It just yeah. It does things that it does have things like do you listen to or do you watch the webcast blah 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 blah, but it doesn't have anything. No, it doesn't. Otherwise,
Doesn't
clearly
ask
would be there somewhere. No.
for your non-team specific league wide multinational podcast.
Yeah,
No?
no, unfortunately not. No. What will be interesting to see is if they do decide if the information that is collated together, it'll be interesting to see how they use this information, but also how they communicate what they have found, and if they will communicate what they have found from this survey. It'll be interesting to see what they do come out with. If anything, it's the Elite League, so probably maybe not. They'll just keep it guarded and be like, we'll hold on to this and we'll just keep it to ourselves.
Precious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I don't know if maybe that's why we'll go with it. But we'll see. We will see. Okay. Let's move on to our next story. And this story, it's an important story to talk about, Dave. Mainly because I think since this story has came out and since a bit more information has kind of came to light about the situation and about what happened in the incident, I think a lot of this past weekend as well, there's been a lot of I suppose inappropriate comments is the best way to put it on social media, on Elite League social media, and it's twice in the space of 2 weeks where we've heard comments being made which just are not helpful in this day and age, and also just like it's just ignorant as well. So for anyone who doesn't know, where have you been if you're Elite League fan, I don't know how you missed this one, but as you'd be aware, the Belfast Giants took on the Sheffield Steelers in Sheffield, and there was an incident that happened in the arena during the third period, or right at the tail end of the game. During the end of the game, the Belfast Giants scored the fourth goal, and as Conway was celebrating, and as the team were finishing up, a young man, a member of the fan, member of the crowd, got a bit agitated and threw a clipboard onto the ice or towards the players and the referees. As part of that, obviously the emotions do run high, and we understand that. The young man himself, who was involved with the issue, this team had spoke to his family, and they had no alternative but to suspend the young man from the rest of the games for the remainder of the season. Now, what did come to light afterwards was that the young man in question, who was involved with this altercation, had a learning disability. He had as far as I'm aware, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn in this way. I think the young man has autism,
Yeah,
and I
well, I think it
think,
was confirmed
yeah, it's
in
confirmed.
a post by the family, I think.
Yeah. So the young man had autism, and just got, I think, just got, everything maybe just kind of
Yeah.
built up on him, and he just got frustrated. And Dave, I'm not gonna pretend I'm in anywhere near next, because I know you're maybe more of an expert than I am, and more about, autism and about the spectrum and everything else than I do. But we obviously had that issue where we had teams then, we had players then say, "Oh, Conway shouldn't have done it because he should have been able to tell the young man had autism." And that was the first comment that was made. It was like, well, how would he know? Oh, he looks autistic. Well, how do you know that? And then the following weekend, this past weekend, there was another comment of a similar nature made, about one of the players, and again, just using real derogatory terms. So, Dave, I suppose my question with you was just like, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but like,
Yeah, no, it's fine. Obviously, I've been thinking about it. Whenever I see it, it could be difficult. As our listeners may or may not know, both my boys have ASD and lie on the autism spectrum. Um, they are very different boys, but I would doubt anyone would ever say. I hope they would never say they look like they have autism. Um, it's a very old world view on it. Um, Autism has changed significantly in its definition over the years. It's, can affect people in myriad of different ways. But one thing that you did get right hit the nail on the head there, was that it can be like a bubbling up of emotion and stimulus that can reach a boiling point. And it means that some people with ASD can struggle to regulate their own emotions and their temper, and they can become angry, and it is something that can happen. Um, None of that is up to a player to interpret, and it's just an unfortunate situation that has arisen. The It sort of comes down to the carers or the parents that need to sort of be on top of these things. But at the end of the day, no one was hurt. It wasn't acceptable, and the Steelers have done something to stop it from happening again. The family will obviously take this as their cue on how they're going to react and how they're going to situate it for further games, and it might be just a matter of them maybe sitting in a different location, and it'll just be, it's difficult. It can be difficult. It's, it's bright lights, loud noises, emotional upheaval. But the big thing that gets me is that it's become it's from some fans in the league, the word autism has become, or autistic has become, an insult, which is just not on. It's something that is hugely backward.
Yep.
And has been, the Giants themselves have put a lot of work into trying to dispel that myth, and that it's purely a bad thing. But yeah, there's still some people that are very narrow-minded out there.
And you kind of mentioned there too. You were going to where I was going next. Actually, you kind of preluded it there, for me. You were saying obviously like the Belfast Giants are just one team who, we know that Adam Keefe, with the comments were being directed towards Adam Keefe because of his outburst. During, and you're going for the next thing I was going to say. Obviously, the comments were made towards Adam Keefe because of his outburst at the Cardiff Devils, the second Cardiff Devils game in Belfast, in which we seen a very passionate Bescarani smash his stick in his helmet and get really agitated over a really bad penalty call. Still, in my opinion, it was a bad penalty call. Awful call. And you could see why Adam Keefe reacted in the way he did, and Adam reacted in a way of slamming shut the bench door over and over and over, and that's where the comment came from. Dave, I suppose my question is, and you just pulled out exactly what I was about to say next. We know the Belfast Giants. we know the Belfast Giants, who have, we know, and Keefe, as was where I was leading to, was we know that Adam Keefe is a patron of Autism NI, and we know that there's teams across the UK, and there's a perfect example of it. If anybody who's not watching the webcast, Dave does have a charity,
Old
Autism
parrots.
Hull Pirates jersey from a number of seasons ago, in which they done a special a night, an awareness raising night, shall we say,
Yeah, they done
around autism.
a big night. It was for the it's a mainland charity. I think it covers all of England, called Think Autism, and it's a purely awareness driven charity rather than just they do assistance for children with autism and adults with autism, but they also do awareness and sort of try and help people understand what it is because it has changed a lot in the last 10 years, 15 years. The long gone are the days that the autism was only used for people who were non-verbal. A lot of other syndromes that all now come into one. Asperger's being a big example. It now falls completely under the same ASD spectrum and is generally not diagnosed anymore. It's all part of the same because it's everybody is so different, and that's the charity tries to raise awareness for it, and that's why they use the jigsaw. All the autism charities use the jigsaw, and it's to do with the fact that everybody's different, and but we all slot together.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
and I guess that my last question before we move on from the topic, Dave, is just like, obviously we see that the Elite League promotes a not a hockey is for all, because that's an NHL thing, and we'll come to that in the NHL in a few minutes. But they do promote a Pride Night, equality Pride Night only, and it's they've started obviously moving towards this Pride Night where we celebrate and we promote LGBTQ and the plus in the community, and getting involved with local, within hockey. Is there maybe something in saying that the Elite League maybe could step up next season and do? I know we don't want endless themed nights, because I know we get them, but I from my opinion, and I don't know what your take would be, and I'm not saying we should have maybe not individual disabilities, because it'd be hard to kind of then pick out which disabilities are represented. We know the Belfast Giants this past weekend did a really great promotion on BSL week for hard of hearing and deaf, and we've seen the Belfast Giants doing that, having obviously a BSL interpreter, a sign language interpreter on the screens in the arena, and that's been happening this year. But obviously we don't want to just pinpoint one specific disability over a wide range of disabilities. So would it be, is it worth, is it something maybe that the Elite League maybe could decide, or maybe think about, that maybe they have,
I would love to
Pride
see them
Night?
do it, and you do have the benefit of, because autism, it's obviously not just something it's not just a UK term. Obviously, it's a global term. It covers the wide range. There is the Global Autism Awareness Day on the 2nd of April. And if you have the opportunity there to link in with a lot of existing things that happen all around the world at the same time. I think the 2nd of April, I think it's every year, it's the 2nd of April. And it could be the last game of the season. You could do something. I do think that the more awareness of it would be amazing. There's an awful lot of charity work that goes on behind the scenes to just facilitate very basic daily needs of specifically children, but also adults going into work. And it would be nice to see someone like the Elite League as a league to say something, and make an awareness. And there's other ones that it would be nice for entire leagues to do. If they were pick a charity in a year and champion it, as a league, or because we don't get that an awful lot. People like to shy away and just take the status quo. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you never know.
Never know. Be an interesting take. Even if it's not an individual basis where they have an individual night for different disabilities, even if they had like a just one night where they celebrate people of all abilities, from a point of view of like making awareness of all disabilities, and that way each team could decide, if they want to bring in people like local charities, whatever it is, and be represented on the night. And you could have like, who we to decide this, but like, they could have people coming in and doing just promotions around the arena, around the concourse, giving out information about different disabilities and stuff. I'm doing it from a point of view, obviously, because I work and I'm quite passionate about blind and partially sighted people. So I'd love an opportunity to kind of have the Giants raise awareness of blind and partially sighted people, because I've seen this past year alone, we have a number of fans in the arena who are reliant on mobility canes and a couple of other bits and pieces, and just there's no real. I would love to just basically make more awareness of it too, and that there's people in their fan base that have a number of different disabilities. So I don't know, maybe it's something we could think about, and never know. We never know. For anybody who's not watching the webcast, Dave is just zooming in on his dog Zeb, who is just lying in the corner of his room. It just looks perfect. Just that's the way I feel right now. Dave, I'm gonna move on. Just two more little bits before we move on. And I don't mean little bits, but just kind of want to just touch upon them. Just I mentioned it before we finished off this period of hockey. This past weekend, both the NIHL and the SNL, is it SNL? Yep, Scottish National League. Both have I suppose they have crowned their champions of the season. The Leeds Knights have picked up the title, the NIHL national title triumph. There this past weekend, winning against the Telford Tigers. That means that they have obviously successfully won the league this season. Before we move into their playoff run, obviously, which comes quickly coming up as well. The playoff run will be starting in the next week or so. Their playoff weekend for the NIHL always takes place. It always seems to be a great show. Takes place in Coventry, I believe, and I believe it's still in Coventry this year too. So if you are inclined and you're in that area, why not go along and see some more playoff hockey? And it's on a separate weekend from Belfast I was going to say the Belfast Giants, the Elite League playoffs. So get your tickets for that. Looking in Scotland then, and the SNL have obviously crowned their champion in the form of the Aberdeen Lynx, having won against the Edinburgh Capitals on the Lynx Ice Arena this past weekend as well. So that is their title. That's the first SNL trophy, the first title that they have won, becoming the Scottish National League champions. Dave, you had mentioned yourself that you had actually mentioned that obviously they played up against the returning,
Edinburgh
shall we say,
Capitals, yeah.
Edinburgh Capitals, and the Edinburgh Capitals took second, I believe, this season.
Second
Is that
in the
right?
league, yeah. It looks like they're. I think that it's. If I'm right in saying, I think it's confirmed, but they were definitely sitting second last time I looked. Yep, the second. So great job to them. First year back after their hiatus.
Yeah.
And may it continue. The hockey world was a bit empty without them, in my opinion. Wish we'd had ended up doing a lot of away weekends this year and didn't manage to make Edinburgh, but it's definitely on my list again. I love my away trips to Edinburgh.
Yeah, there's a few on that list for next season. Definitely a few away trips on the list for next season. We'll just see how many we can get to. I know, Dave, we talked about it. Obviously we're coming towards the end of the season, but we've talked about it. We know which ones we need to tick off next season. I have two to still tick off, and I think you have two to tick off still as well.
Both have
we have. Yeah, you have Manchester Guildford, and I have Guildford Dundee. So we'll need to definitely get our fingers out and go to Guildford next season. So watch this space. Okay, that is it. I don't have any more stories for period one. Dave, do you have anything?
Nothing else, not for me.
Great. Well, with that, then we'll get stuck into our period two of hockey.
Hello and welcome to period two of hockey. This is where we'll talk about hockey from the rest of the world. We'll start off with another situation, I don't know a way to put that, with around the opt-out of Pride, which is shocking to see again. But I'll fire it over to you, Marty. I believe you've got more details on it.
Yeah, so obviously, Dave, you weren't here for our last podcast recording, just over 2 weeks ago. We obviously were talking at that point, and the reason why I'm pointing it to you is because obviously it was the Minnesota Wild, was the last team to opt out of the Pride weekend, the Pride jersey, shall we say, and the Pride tape and stuff. Now, what I should say is it did turn out some players were using the Pride tape as part of that Pride celebration weekend or whatever it was, but they decided to opt out of the jerseys. We're here another 2 weeks on. We've got another story, similar story, happening in the NHL, and that's in the form of Chicago. This time, the Chicago Blackhawks will not be wearing Pride themed jerseys. Now, what's interesting about this one, and what I kind of wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, is that up until this point, teams haven't really been very forthcoming with a lot of information about the reasons why they've made a team decision around not wearing jerseys. We heard well, this kind of briefly was mentioned. The first one was obviously in against the Flyers. It was the Philadelphia Flyers. It was one player decided not to wear the jersey because of political reasons, and we're about to talk about that, and that actually would make a bit of sense. We had another team in New York Rangers who didn't really make a comment about reasons why they kind of done it. There was a religious reason was one put in as well, and there was also one player this week from another team who opted out. I think it was a goaltender for, I can't remember who it was, but opted out as well this week of wearing the jersey, and he just simply said, "Look, I'm not wearing it because, I'm a Christian, believe in the Bible and what it says, and therefore I'm not going to wear it because it's against my belief. But I'm, supportive of the LGBT blah blah blah." But this time around, it was interesting. Chicago have released this information to say that they were advised by the NHL and advised by basically not Homeland Security, but advised by powers that be anyway somewhere that that there was an issue around wearing warm-up jerseys to commemorate Pride Night because of Russian law that expands restrictions on activities such as promoting LGBTQ. That there was a security concern involving that law. Vladimir Putin signed this in December, and there's a real concern around the players who are on the Chicago team who are Moscow native, who are from Moscow, who are Russian natives, and that this is the main reason why they have decided not to go ahead with wearing the jerseys, in order to make sure that there was no risk to their Russian player, because of security concerns and security risks of things that were put in place in December. Now, if this is the case, and it seems to be that it's a security concern, that there is a real legitimate concern and safety fear for Russian players who are in the NHL who will be eventually going back home, possibly, I would imagine, maybe over the off season. Don't know what's happening there. Obviously, we know what's going on with Russia and Ukraine still happening, and there's still the war going on there. So we don't know what the movements are for players during off season. But Dave, I mean, if we're looking at this, and Chicago has come out and said, well, actually, this is the reason why we're doing it. Is there a potential that actually that has been something that's been murmuring the whole time, and just this is the first team that's come out and said that there's a real concern, that they've been advised that there's a security concern?
It could very well be. The LGBTQ laws in the US and in Russia, sorry, are so draconian. It's terrifying. It's not even just that they've banned the sort of homosexual marriages and things. It's like the 1960s Britain, where the actual act of being homosexual is illegal. And but they're building on that, and they've been building on it for a few years, where they've been looking at the sort of the actually supporting people who are LGBTQ is also illegal, or maybe construed as illegal by some officials in Russia. It's one of the reasons they were going to pull the Winter Olympics from Sochi. Was it 3 Olympics ago? And it's been something that's been ongoing for a very, very long time. It's one of the many issues that Russia currently has. I know that a lot of the players, especially younger players, struggled to get out of Russia, having to sidestep travel bans, and Kirill Kiparov from the Minnesota Wild had to travel to Dubai he basically had to get a visa to Dubai and then fly from Dubai to the US just to get out of Russia because he's of a certain age. And I don't know if he's done his national service. And that's what they're obviously a lot of these players will have managed to sidestep their national insurance. May it be with university contracts or sponsorship deals with the USSR or the USSR, Russia. But it will be. It's hard to say because the country is so Russia's so tight-lipped and holds back a lot of clarity on any of these things. But I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah. Yep.
And it would put a lot of players in a very difficult situation, especially ones who are still, not even just Russian natives, but are like they've entire families out there, and it's not just them they're worried about; it's their wider family.
What is interesting, though, what we should note is that while Chicago have cited the political reasons and safety concerns and security concerns around whether or not the players will be safe in terms of obviously the decisions that have been made in Russia and laws that have been signed off there, what is interesting to see is the Florida Panthers are still planning to go ahead, move forward with their planned Pride Night tonight. So they're still going ahead tonight with their Pride Night. And they do have their goaltender is Russian, Sergei Bobrovsky. And they are planning to still do the jerseys tonight. Panthers did come out today and they did put out a statement to say, as an organisation, we've decided, and rightfully so, to move forward with it and support it and celebrate it. Teams around the league and players around the league, they've got the right to their own opinion and we've got the right to ours. We will still continue to put on our Pride Night as planned. So they're still moving ahead with it. Obviously, we know previously, as we've already mentioned, we've had the San Jose Sharks goalie James Reimer. We had the Philadelphia Flyers defenseman, who's obviously Russian as well, Provorov. They refused to wear the warm jerseys, but they both cited religious beliefs at the time. So it's unsure, it's unknown whether or not it was actually because of the Russian law, and actually they just didn't he didn't want to rock the boat as well. So it'd be interesting to see where that's going to go. But definitely there's a few more Pride Nights to happen this season. I know that there's the one tonight, which is still supposedly going ahead. But we do have a few more to happen before the end of this season is done. And I think, if I remember, Buffalo Sabres and the Vancouver Canucks are the last two, which are upcoming over the next 2 weekends. So we'll see how things pan out there to see if any more teams are actually taking part. What was interesting though to see this week as well was that the NHL's first openly out gay player did come out and say that he was dismayed by everything that has happened this year, and he feels very despondent in the fact that the NHL hasn't actually made an official statement about what should be happening, and he's calling for decisions to be made for next season so that there's a clear understanding and a clear guidance from the NHL in relation to what is happening, so that all teams will follow the same kind of protocol moving forward, which is understandable, I guess, especially coming from someone who's within that community who is a member of that community. So I'm sure this is just another story that's going to keep rumbling on, especially during the off season when we find out more about what the plan is for the Hockey is for Everyone as it moves on, to see how they're going to kind of, I guess, how is it going to evolve over the off season to try to create something more out of it. But we'll see. Time will tell. Dave, are you happy enough if I move on to my next story?
Yes, go ahead.
So the next story I'm going to come up with, I'm going to go to the next serious one, if that's okay, Dave. And I know you've seen this story and you're aware of this story, and I think it's worth mentioning. It's in here rather than in the. I think John had put it in to the running order, and I was when I was looking at the running order, or I was trying to decide, did this story belong in period 2 or period 3? But I think it's okay to keep it here. So the story, it's a very serious story that came out just over a week ago, or I think it was last weekend. Carson Breer, name may not sound too familiar, but I'm sure the surname does for any NHL fan. He's the son of Flyers GM Danny Brewer. He was caught this past weekend or the weekend before launching a double amputee's empty wheelchair down a flight of stairs at a bar. The video, there's a video out there. There's a video showing he's a Carson is currently playing for the Mercyhurst men's hockey team. So he's playing in I suppose you can call it a college level at this time. And there is a criminal investigation, I think, happening, and the charges were being filed. After what was seen on the video was himself and his friend, lacrosse player, were seen in the video basically standing at the top of the stairs of this bar, chatting away, whatever it was, chatting to people coming up the stairs, and as whenever they're on their own at the top of the stairs and before they finish up their conversation, just as they finish their conversation, you can see Carson lifting the chair pretty much and just kind of throwing it down the stairs, causing some significant damage to the wheelchair, and obviously then the chair itself completely damaged, and the Sydney, who is the young lady who is in need of the wheelchair, devastated. She kind of said that she didn't want to keep any money that was donated to her for a new chair, and she wanted to give it away to those who really needed the money. But a significant amount of money when you think about the wheelchair, the damage that was caused to it, especially with the fact that what was needed. I mean, what's your take on this? I mean, it's shocking.
We talked about it briefly on last Friday.
Yep, at the game. Yep.
And I was sitting, God, geez, it's a weird thing to do. And then you watch the video, and it's really weird. It's really strange. Like he sits in the chair and all beforehand, before pushing it down, and you can see like everybody's walking away, and then he just sort of decides to push it. It's just like,
yep.
What the heck are you doing? And you know the most harrowing thing is that it's not like she had just left the chair there. The reason the chair was there was that she had to be lifted down to the bathroom, and there was nowhere else to leave the chair. It's not like she just randomly left. She can't, obviously double amputation. It's not just leaving her chair. So there was people who were helping her to go to the bathroom, friends or Good Samaritans or whatever. For her to come back out to find out that her lifeline was, destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's shocking, and a real bad lapse in judgment for somebody who probably had a substantial career in hockey ahead of him. But this isn't the first time he's came into trouble. He was now I can't get the exact reason why, but due to misconduct, he had been kicked out of Arizona State and expelled from their hockey team. So there's a number of lapses in judgment here that he has caused. Once as an accident and twice as a habit. Is there something more underlying that needs to be? Does he need to maybe talk about something? Does he need to find a way to find? Obviously, the ice hockey is not his outlet for his emotional issue. Does he need to, find another way to vent? Here's hoping he doesn't do anything like this again.
Yep.
It is crazy, and I don't know what goes through someone's brain to do that.
No.
And it's one thing, obviously it'd be crazy somebody doing that anywhere, but at least we have a healthcare system that makes it easy for you, easier, make it easy, makes it easier than the chairs are never cheap, but they're tailored to your individual needs.
Yep.
And that's doctor's time and physio's time, and it just adds up and adds up and adds up. It's just absolutely crazy that someone would just see some other person's property,
Yep.
something as vital as a chair and a wheelchair, and just push it down.
Push down.
It's just crazy.
Awful. It's crazy. It is, as you say. It's just beyond belief. Obviously, his
Yeah.
reaction and what he decided to do, him and his friend, I should say. Not just it wasn't just him on his own; it was his friend as well. But obviously, he's the one that was seen physically lifting it or physically pushing the chair and actually physically doing the damage to it. Um, and I think it's very big of the fact that Sydney, who is the young lady who obviously was at the who was on the receiving end of losing that lifeline, as you call it, Dave. The fact that she has said, look, I don't want that money that you're trying to put together to put that you're donating towards me. And there was a call somewhere that I'd seen this week as well where and she came out and said, well, it's not. Why would it be their responsibility? There was a call that was put out straight away after the incident happened. There was a shout. There was a fans on Twitter were just of NHL were just kind of like, the Philadelphia Flyers should be paying for the replacement of this chair. And she was right. Sydney was right in what she said. Sydney was like, well, why would it be a team in the NHL's responsibility to pay for my chair whenever it had nothing to do with them? And I see where she's coming from. Because, obviously, I agree, it doesn't make sense for, that would be, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But it was worth mentioning, as you say, stupid young, you'd look past if it was maybe one incident, but the fact that, there's a repeat kind of, shall we say, there's definitely something that needs to be looked at there. And we hope, as you say, that this young man gets the
One
help and
thing,
support that he needs.
best thing that's came out of this, obviously seeing him getting was just desserts and all that jazz. He's banned from the bar.
Yeah. At least there was something came out of it. Okay. We have one last story in this period, which seems to be the story that has just completely blown just blown up the internet, like blown up social media, for especially hockey social media.
Oh yeah,
The NHL announced this week that as of the 2024-2025 season, that the
gonna wear
NHL
tea
will
towels.
the NHL will be replacing Adidas branded hockey consumer ice uniforms on ice and also authentic retail jerseys, so the ones that you would buy on a store. So they're replacing the Adidas jerseys with Fanatics jerseys. Now, if people out there are thinking to themselves, well, why are people worried about Fanatics? Or why is people, they don't understand? Fanatics, shall we say, have a history of just really shoddy, poor quality product.
Um,
Um,
yeah, I have a couple. Do you have any in here?
I do too somewhere.
I really
Don't hate
like
me.
my Fanatics replica jersey, which I think is here. No, it's not. Um, it's really nice. It's gorgeous, and now it's uncrested, no number. It's just the standard jersey. It's lovely and it's brilliant. It was a pretty penny, to be fair. But I also got a long sleeve sort of jersey-like jumper. It
Yep.
has the ties and whatnot, but it has a printed logo, and after two washes, all starting to peel.
Oh, yep.
And yeah, and you're going, it wasn't cheap because obviously buying them from the US never is. So they're hit and miss. But I heard some horror stories about people buying, because of this has exploded on social media, people buying crested jerseys with names and numbers and getting the wrong name or the wrong number or misspelled names, things like that there. So if you're buying it, for example, as a gift
Yep.
and you don't know who the player is, and it comes like my wife, for example, buying me a jersey, she's not going to know how the players spell their names. And she's going to hand it to me, and on the day I get it, I'm going to go, who's Flurby?
um, I'm sorry, I have to write that down. That's pretty good. I suppose the big thing about it is that the deal that they put in place, this is a Fanatics deal, which is a 10-year agreement, which is set to run through until 2033-34 campaign. I suppose the big thing, I suppose one of the big concerns, and you said it exactly that, Dave. There has been previous history of just botched quality product. I think a lot of people are angry and annoyed because I think Fanatics as an organization has had previous history. And I think the big thing about it is the lack of quality and authenticity about the jerseys themselves. I think there's a bit of concern around like what the quality of the jersey will
Quality
be,
control.
especially if they're so mass produced in the same
Yeah.
way. There's also a massive concern around I suppose the ability for when you've got the likes of Reebok and you've got the likes of Adidas or Adidas, whatever you want to call it. When you've got the likes of those two big brand companies who have been dominating the NHL over the last number of years, producing all of the on ice and off ice replicas and everything else, there's a knowledge there to know that they can churn out and they can make the right number of jerseys right across the board. There's a concern that Fanatics aren't a big enough company and a big enough organization that can meet the demand for all of the fans who'll be looking jerseys, and that is a real concern that people are worried about. That, and also the fact that they don't have the same setup as say the Adidas does in terms of the customization and the ability to customize in the same way. And as you said yourself, that whole idea of adding patches and accessories, it's there's a concern that that's not even going to happen because in previous experiences of it of having Fanatics, it's never been possible. And as you say, the quality is just not as good. And as you say, like I've got some items which are Fanatics, which it's hit and miss. Like I have a jersey which is okay quality, but I've had Fanatics like like t-shirts and I think one of my baseball style t-shirts. I have one of those, and it's the quality wasn't great, and you say it disappeared really quickly. So I don't know, and I can see why people are concerned, and it's a significantly long contract that has been signed for this. Hopefully, Fanatics can turn it around and can prove
There
people
was
wrong, but
one
a
other
lot
thing that
of
on this point that I would like to add as well, which is something that I found, which I was really shocked by. So the front runner before the what do you call what are they called whenever you tenders
tender.
came in, was Nike.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone expected Nike to take it. Nike didn't even put in a tender.
Oh,
They said it wasn't. Now, bearing in mind, Nike do all the international jerseys, so all the
yes.
World Cup jerseys when they did them, and all the Olympic jerseys and World Championship jerseys
Yep.
are all Nike. They said that it was not worth their while, and their brand would be distancing itself from the NHL
Hmm.
and hockey in general. So I thought that was a strange one. It's this. I think the thing that they have with hockey is that it's always the third sport, if you know what I mean. Baseball, basketball, then ice hockey. When it comes to merch, and selling merch and volumes that are sold. Um, but I believe, if I'm right in saying, I think Fanatics have started doing the baseball jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is the case, then they have two out of the big three. And you might see an improvement with that growth.
Yep.
But it is very strange that one of the big sports apparel companies just didn't even bother putting in a tender.
Yeah, interesting.
Scary stuff.
So, I mean, it's yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting to see now what the Fanatics does. Obviously we've got another year to wait. There's one more year left in the contract for, what was it? Did I say 2023, 2024? So that's this season actually. That's this coming season. So, that'll be interesting to see what these new
But
jerseys. To be
yeah,
fair, the look of the jerseys aren't going to significantly change too much because the jersey always looks same.
well, you say that there was a big change from Reebok to Adidas.
I suppose, yeah. I don't have an Adidas one. I don't know why I was
They've
looking
done a whole,
behind me.
they've done a
Um,
whole jersey redesign. The like the Wilds jersey is nothing like what it was for Reebok. Ours was either the red with the circle or the Minnesota,
yep,
and now it's the green and the logo. So
yeah. It'll
big
be
change, could be
interesting.
big changes ahead.
Could be. You know us, we like a good jersey on this show, so we will definitely be looking at those coming into the start of the next season to see what significant changes have been made to the to jerseys. Um, that's it. That's all the stories I
Yeah, I think
have for this
that's.
period, I think.
I have nothing else to add. That was a quick second period.
Yeah, and I think the third period is going to be just as quick, if not quicker. We'll
Wow.
get stuck into period three. Okay, as John is not here, I will take up the mantle of period. I'll take on period three, which is our general Nucky
Lucky
news.
news.
So Nucky news, our third period, is just any other stories that are kind of doing the rounds that don't really quite fit into our period one and period two. Um, Only two quick ones. One I know that John has put in. I think obviously because of his love for running, which we'll get to in a second. But I'm going to start off with mine first, because I thought this was a fun story that kind of was released this week, and I kind of just wanted to mention it. This, as of this week, the first ever Guinness World Record for oldest female ice hockey player was recorded. Hockey players, this lady. I suppose, according to the Guinness World Records, a lady named Linda Sinrod has officially become the world's oldest female ice hockey player ever. Sinrod is 82 years of age, and she is still playing ice hockey to a certain level. She is a Virginia resident in the States, and she, as a college student, before getting she started playing hockey at the age of 35, which is the age when most players are usually trying to hang up their skates. But that's when Linda first started. Linda became a founding member of the first female ice hockey team in Washington, D.C. at the age of 75. But she was asked to leave the team because she could no longer keep up with the younger players. But she does still play in a league that chooses teams twice a year and still plays hockey. And so because she still plays hockey, she decided that she would look into the record for oldest hockey player. And what Sinrod had said was that she always thought she was one of the oldest people, or the oldest females to play hockey. And she checked the Guinness Book of Records, and there was no record ever created for oldest hockey player. So she basically just decided, I'll throw my name and I'll see what happens. So she put forward to the Guinness World Records and put forward that she was the oldest ice hockey player at the age of 82. And Guinness World Records had the proof, had the information, and were like, yep, we can stand by that, and we can attest that you are the world's oldest female ice hockey player. I mean, 82 years of age, still going strong. What do you think?
That's unreal. That is unreal.
I mean,
82.
Exactly, fair play to her.
You're lucky to get out of bed at 82.
I know, and there is photographs. if there is photographs, Guinness World Record did post the information on their official social media channels on the 19th of March. So just this week. So if you go to the Guinness World Records for the 19th of March, you will see that they have posted up Sinrod on her skates in the middle of a game. So where you go, fair play to her, and that's a great achievement at the age of 82. Last story for this period, and again, this is the one I think John put in because of his interest in running, and obviously this is coming up on marathon season, and one of the biggest marathons of the year, and one of the biggest marathons, one of the most famous marathons in the world, I guess. Is the Boston Marathon, which takes place every year. Obviously, we know the Boston Marathon. Obviously we know what happened in Boston a few years back with the marathon, and how significant the marathon is in Boston for that city. But this year, this year, Sedino Chara has announced that he will be running his first ever marathon on April 17th in Boston. He is going to be running in support of the Thomas E. Smith Foundation and the Hyatt Foundation. Don't quite know what they do, but the legendary defenseman is inspired. Oh, there you go. Hyatt became the first icon of the race of pushing his son in a wheelchair 26.2 miles, and he's done that on a number of occasions. Hyatt passed away on September 2021 at the age of 80, and I suppose that's where they're raising money then, is for his charity, for raising money towards wheelchairs, which is poignant given the fact that one of our stories earlier in this episode was around wheelchair and destruction, and someone's wheelchair being destroyed. I mean, great on him, and I could see why John had added this in. Fair play to him for his first ever marathon and doing it in Boston. Don't really know much more else to say on that one.
Obviously, it's a cracking charity, cracking guy. But for Zeno Chara, what's that about? Like 4 steps? It's huge.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Where his stride is probably longer than most people's stride, so he should be able to finish it probably in the space of 2 hours. Um, so well, yeah, fair play to him. I've only done one marathon, and I wasn't as fit as what Zdeno Chara is, and I've always said, and I've sworn by it, that I'm never going to do a marathon ever again. It was hell on earth, and I'm going to stand by that. If I ever say again, Dave, that I'm going to do a marathon, just slap me and go, do you not remember what happened in 2018? So yeah, I'm out. Unless it's somewhere really nice, like if I somehow get into the Boston Marathon or maybe the London Marathon. No, stop it,
Do
man.
the
It's never
do
happened.
the Disney marathon in Florida.
Do they have a marathon?
They have a marathon, yeah.
I thought they just done like a Disney 10K where you run around with
Do,
like people in like stormtrooper outfits and stuff.
they do the 10 too, but they do a marathon. But the Disney 10Ks, you win really fancy medals.
Ooh, nice. No, I'm not going. I'm not going. Just anyway, off the subject. Okay. And actually, that is our last story for this week. We don't have anything else. We don't have any questions. We don't have any overtime segment. So actually, Dave, that takes us to the end of this week's show. Short and sweet.
Short and sweet, yeah.
As we mentioned at the top of the episode, we are heading in. This is our last recording before before the end of the official Elite League. Well, before the Elite League officially comes to an end. So our next episode we will be recording will be when we talk about who is the crowned champions of the Elite Ice Hockey League. So watch out for that one. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything crossed, we hope that we'll be talking about the Belfast Giants. If not, we'll be talking and singing the praises of Guildford Flames, who've had a fantastic season so far this year.
As long as it's one of those two,
not-
I won't be too bad. Don't want a
Exactly.
chance to win, like, but as long as
Yeah,
it's not Sheffield.
exactly. So wherever you're getting your hockey from this week, make sure you enjoy it, because there's only 2 weeks left of official league campaign. Obviously, we've got the playoffs coming up, but we'll talk about that in our next recording, because we're pretty excited, because that means we're heading off. We're going. So with that, we'll sign off or do the usual. If you haven't already, you can check out our website, door14hockey.com, where you can check out all of the content and previous episodes, and check out the information from this episode on there as well. Podcast providers of choice, make sure you like, thumbs up, subscribe, like, buttons, whatever it is that your provider of choice asks you to do. It really helps us if you kind of could leave us a review or give us a thumbs up on those platforms of choice. And we are on all our social media, so don't forget to get involved. Give us your thoughts and opinions on any of the topics we've talked about in this episode. We know a few people came back to us about our comments around Dave, I know you weren't here last week, but there was a question that was put out by quite a few people into us about the Elite League. Is the Elite League a development league? Is it not? We're not going to go back into the subject again, because we had a few replies, basically, of people being like, "Oh, what are you saying?" So we will get back into that. Maybe we will later in the season, or
Well,
start of next season.
we do it next season, yeah.
We'll see what happens with the import limits, and we'll see where that conversation goes. But if you do, please get involved. Please reach out to us. Please send us a message our way. We're on all social medias, Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram at Door14Hockey. And with that, we will sign off for this week. I'm Marty.
I'm Dave.
Have a great week.